everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined by Sam tonight for the very first time on the channel as we bring you a review on The Amazing Spider-Man 2, of course, directed by Mark Webb, released in, scarily, 2014 now, which is seven years ago, which feels like yesterday in truth with this film coming out and all the surroundings. I think X-Men a couple of weeks after, I remember, as well, and you had an X-Men credit scene.
God,
and
it was a very busy time.
Yeah.
That whole period for film. I think a lot of big ones.
Definitely pre-Tom Holland as well. And as you all know, we are working towards the release date of No Way Home. The time this video goes up will be 3 days away in the UK. Sorry, Americans, you come out the extra 2 days. Granted, you keep spoiling everything on social media anyway. No one really cares anymore. But that being said, of course, there are no Way Home spoilers in this. I don't think there's even been a review embargo. I don't think the world premiere has happened. But if you're tuning in as a fan of The Amazing Spider-Man, this is the place to be. If you're a fan rewatching them, if you like the Raimi films, you like the Tom Holland films, we're very curious to know your opinions on this. So do comment below your thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. All the good stuff, all the bad stuff, things you're intrigued on, things you think worked but didn't work. And we'll speak a little bit later on about some of Sony's plans. But do hit the subscribe button because there are going to be more Spider-Man reviews. Well, one more review coming this Thursday. So that is that. And Sam, I'm going to introduce you. So obviously we've not been on the channel before, but I've wanted to get you on for a while. And I don't mean this patronizing. And I've said this before we started recording as well. So I think you know what's coming. You sent a tweet out last week, I think, talking about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I saw that and thought, okay, this is going to be the time I finally get him on for a video. And I'm just for people home that obviously may not have seen that tweet. Your basic thoughts, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Are you a big fan?
I would say I'm a fan. Yeah, I'm not the biggest. I'm sure there's a bigger fan than me, but you know, there's a lot of people nowadays who may be looking at it differently or having a new perspective on things. I, from day dots, enjoyed it. I enjoyed the first one. I enjoyed this one even more. I actually earlier today went on my Facebook and tried to search for you know, if I had written anything about it, and I actually did find a couple of things actually. So one is from 14th of July. Just watched The Amazing Spider-Man again. Definitely prefer this to the Sam Raimi series. One on 6th of September of that year. Just watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2 again. I still really like it despite all the shit it gets. And then there was another one. Oh yeah, there's me reacting to 2 of the trailers. One in January of that year. This looks really good. And one in February. Okay, can't wait to see this. And that was when the Super Bowl ad came out. So yeah, I think even before it came out, I was a fan, and I liked it so much and watched it a lot at the time. And I've just watched it again yesterday, just to see if I still enjoyed it, and I still really do. Which is shocking for a lot of people, not to pun Electro. But
I thought that. no, it's really good because this film, I mean, talking about the last review, me and Dave jumped on, we both bashed The Amazing Spider-Man. And I think what we both kind of said in that review was we really enjoyed it when we first saw it. I mean, I've seen it since. I think last time I saw the first one was before this one came out. And I remember really liking it, you know, very Nolan oriented. I'm a massive Nolan fanboy as well. So there was things like that. And when I watched it at the weekend, I thought, oh God, like, how did I like this? I'm struggling with this. And I know we spoke a bit before we started recording, but I was really curious for Amazing Spider-Man 2 because I'm going to just say that the first time I saw the film, I was so confused. I don't know if I hated it or if I loved it. And I very rarely in my life had that opinion where I have to go and watch it again to not have an opinion on it. But I think Tenet was similar, where like I physically couldn't process the film, so I can't determine if I like this film or dislike it because I didn't understand it. And Amazing Spider-Man 2, I was on this fence. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I went again the next day when it came out, and I remember not having a good time. And I've kind of, I don't want to say I've mocked the film for 7 years. I think I've maybe mocked Sony more so than the film, which is going to be its own discussion point later. But as the years have gone by, I haven't seen this film again. So watching it two nights ago was the first time since that second cinema showing, which is probably the second day it came out. There's not even really time between them. And I quite enjoyed it. Like, it has its flaws, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna, say it, but as a viewing experience, it didn't feel like 2 hours 15 like I thought at the time. And yes, it's got its problems, but I kind of came out of like I'm potentially really excited about some of these characters coming back. Some of them, obviously, one of which is confirmed in Electro, so we can obviously talk about that bit later on. But I had a bit of second wind of this, and I'm very curious because online I've seen a lot of people recently rewatching or revisiting or seeing for the first time not just the Garfield films but Maguire as well. And I think we're in like Spider-Man mania now with No Way Home coming out. I've not seen this much hype on a sole comic book character in a very, very long time. Which, I mean, I know, bar maybe Batman, no one's really had multiple reboots and things like that, so it's very interesting. But I was very curious to know what sort of you think as well. I know you said you enjoyed it at the time, but did you ever dip in and out, or is it always something you've sort of quite enjoyed?
Yeah, because I mean, I would say Spider-Man is like definitely up there in terms of like favorite comic book character, favorite superhero. And like many others, is one that you kind of are born knowing about. Whether it's because you just know the original theme song, or you saw one of the cartoons, you watched the original trilogy of films. There's so many like different entryways to that. Um, and so I think because I wasn't a big fan of the original trilogy, I kind of was, I went into the first film, especially with like a very broad mind, just thinking, what could this be? And then because it was so different, I think in some places they try a bit too hard to be different and to stay away from references to the other trilogy. Uh, I think I really appreciated it, at least at the time, because I feel like, oh, this is one that I enjoy a bit more. And I think because the whole Avengers thing was really gearing up, but then it was nice just going something without expectations for, oh, these are going to come out of nowhere. You're going to get other people coming in. It's just about this character and learning about this character from a different point of view. And getting someone like Gwen Stacey, who was very briefly in that trilogy, but who I later found out was a big part of Spider-Man. So to get that character in there too, and I think then to the sequel, to then get what I think is a fully galvanized, fully enjoyable, entertaining piece of work. That's a really good blend of entertainment, humor, darkness, and there's a lot of different themes there. So I'm really glad that I can watch it again and know that I stand by what I felt 7 years ago, and I'm gutted that it didn't continue. In that, even though I know why, but I felt there's so much potential, more so than the original trilogy, I would say.
No, absolutely. Potential is a really good word here, because I think starting to get into the main obviously character, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield. When we spoke about the first film, it was really interesting because I mean, Emma Stone will do after, because obviously how important Gwen Stacy is, but the biggest change for me that this had from the original trilogy was not doing Mary Jane, was doing Gwen Stacy. And you mentioned it as well yourself that they were trying to drop references to the original ones. Bringing in Gwen was probably the smartest thing they could do, because it was a completely new character for people at home who might not be familiar with comics or whatever, or for people that just thought, why are they rebooting Spider-Man with Mary Jane again when they've got X, Y, and Z to instead use? It was a no-brainer getting Gwen Stacy. And I think in the first film, their chemistry was through the roof. I know in real life they were a couple for a couple of years, and I think when we got to this one, but we'll get to her death later on. But this is probably not a cursed film, but Gwen Stacy's like a cursed character. Like, she's kind of like Uncle Ben. Like, why are you famous? Well, for dying. So it's, I think when the first one came out, it's okay. The second one, you got to do Green Goblin and you got to kill her. And I remember that was a thing for a couple of years. Like, there was like, everyone was like, okay, so when's she going to get killed? And I remember in every single trailer possible, Sony wanted to show us the clock tower, show us her falling. I know that they've done that for the new film.
I remember I looked a lot of the behind the scenes stuff in the build up and the leaks and stuff, and that's why I researched a bit more about, because I was like, oh, why would she need to die? And then I found out about the comic, And I was like, oh right, okay. And then everyone was obsessed with the costume. Everyone was obsessed with
the coat.
and I was like, okay, it's the purple dress, the boots, the green coat. It's like, okay. And I was too, because I was like, oh wow, this is like, are they going to do it or not? And really, we should have just been like, oh yeah, they are going to do it. But you just have that, are they going to, subvert expectations? Are they going to do something different? But yeah, I think the whole build up to that was probably the biggest hype about it, really. That was the thing that I saw the most. And I think especially because you think in a sequel like this, especially for like a superhero film, you wouldn't expect. I think maybe the only thing that's kind of like similar in recent years is it Rachel in the Dark Knights? Something like that, where it's like, whoa, I didn't really think that could happen. And obviously to the casual viewer, it could be a much bigger shock than it would have been to someone who's a fan. So yeah, it was an interesting build up to knowing, especially because the relationship was so strong. You knew that they were together in real life. This chemistry was there. The thought of her going in the second film kind of seems like, could that actually happen? Can they do that? Because a lot of films haven't done that successfully. They've tried to do the Darth Vader, I am your father, second film, big reveal something. And it's not worked in other cases, but I do credit them for going for a certain thing. You have Captain Stacey's words echoed in Peter's mind. You've got him literally being in front of him. He's got this weight on there. He's so scared, and the fact that she says so many times, and I've written it down so many times. This is what she wants to do. This is her choice. She's gonna fight no matter what. Sometimes I think they're a bit heavy-handed with the dialogue about it all, especially in her speech at the beginning. I think, okay, this is a bit too on the nose. But again, I think it was kind of a necessary thing for what they were attempting to do with the series, attempting what they were trying to do for that third and fourth film. But I know that they cut Mary Jane out of it. Shailene Woodley. Which I don't know whether that was a bad thing at the end of the day. It's probably a good thing if we weren't getting a third one. I think if we were getting a third one, it would have been good to see her and Gwen interact, because I think people would pit them against each other. It would have been good to see them, get on with each other and actually see that, MJ and Pete had a friendship. But this film does have a lot of characters anyway. You've got a lot of stuff to go over in these, is it 2 hours 15, around about that, I think. There's a lot to do in that time.
It's you mentioned the Captain Stacey death in the film before as well. I think this was the big draw for me heading into this one, especially rewatching it. Was the I said, we kind of know she's going to die. Like, you could just assume it. You've introduced Gwen Stacy; she'll die in one of the films at some point. And the whole premise of the promise, I don't mean that sound weird, but it's a really interesting thing, because we assume she'll die, but by him having the sort of the final wish of the father that he bears some responsibility to, even though it was never his fault, he knows it is his responsibility with Gwen. And I think it was that choice from the writing with the directing that was a big thing, because it increased the drama that Peter is fully aware that this can happen and could happen. And I think when you build up to the ending, their relationship has been so well done. Even with her going off to Oxford on a, we kind of know, I'm going to Oxford. I was like, you're not. You're going to die.
Yeah, you're in the taxi wearing that outfit, on like near a bridge, which is obviously where it happens in the comics. So you kind of getting that as well on top of everything else that's been heavy-handed. I didn't really notice, but the first shot is literally cogs inside of Richard Parker's watch, and I was like, okay, that's something. You have. I also noticed that I think watching the films back to back is a really good thing, actually, because you get Uncle Ben's speech at the end, and you get her speech after as well, and it's you get two of Peter's most important people in his life. Basically, he hears from both of them after they're gone, the words that he needs to carry on. And I like that. I mean, I don't know what they would have done in the third film. I've heard someone alive would actually be talking to him about that sort of stuff. But I think the whole way they handled it, maybe they leaned on it a bit too much for the film. But I think overall, in what they intended to do with it, I think was well executed.
Yeah, it's such a big plot point, and as well, you mentioned as well how sort of brave it is to do something like that to kill them off. I think because it's been earned, it reaches a point where when you get to the climax, I think, you said she's got the clothes, she's in the taxi, you know what's going to happen next. They've teased it enough, but it's like, how do you sort of get to the execution of those moments? And I think it's not. I mean, we can talk about Goblin or throwing a villain in later on, but that's not just been something where like she's randomly been kidnapped and thrown off a tower and died. That is a couple of hours of screen time, and I think that's where I think it works so much better, because they've at least, for a lack of plan or maybe too much planning that Sony tends to do, at least it seemed like something there that was dead set pan that we're going to do this in this film. And even the sort of mini character arc after she's died with Peter and the guilt, and it's Spider-Man's been gone for 5 months, which I had completely forgotten about.
Same.
I will say this. It's very tricky to have a Spider-Man to quit when it was done 2 films before. I'm not to get into the blatant comparisons, but when he's gone, at least that's like a portion of the film, not minute 2 hours 10 mark to 2 hours 11 mark. That was something that threw me. I don't think it's that bad, but it was just the sort of dramatic effect. Let's say he's not been around for so long, and yeah, it's a weird one. But their relationship, the final moments between them, and even the death, getting into that, is brutal. And they tease it. I said they tease it, but they literally straight up throw her down, catch her, throw her down again, or they'll catch her, and you keep thinking like, come on, like just kill her already. And it kind of made me laugh.
It's like Jurassic World a little bit with Zara and it's like, oh, what are you doing to this poor woman who did not deserve any of this? You're putting her through the worst type of torture imaginable. I mean, I feel worse for Zara because so it's just completely innocent. But I mean, at least Gwen knew what she was signing up for. And again, she says it. She's like, I'm the only one who can do this. I'm here because I actually need to be here. And if she wasn't there, then those planes would have crashed. A lot more, would have happened. She helped save the day, so it doesn't feel like an MJ moment where it's like, oh well, she just happens to be there, or oh, that she's only important because of who she is to Spider-Man. Yes, that is true in Gwen's case, but there's also another thing there, and I think that's really important. I think that's what makes her a lot more likable, and what makes the ultimate, death hit, more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of the death, you mentioned the power plant. Let's talk about some of the villains in this film, because my word, there's 3. I mean, one of them has 2 scenes of screen time, but we'll get to them. But something I learned this week: this has a foreign name in some countries. This is like the Electro Rising or something.
Yeah,
which
like I think the Rise of Electro. I think.
Yeah, it completely threw me, because over here in the UK, at least, it's been called The Amazing Spider-Man 2. For 7 years. I'm guessing it was probably the States that they had this Electro name. But getting into him first, we can say he's coming back in No Way Home. He's in the trailers. It's still Jamie Foxx. Another Tom Holland villain wearing Iron Man equipment, which is a conversation for maybe next Thursday. But I remember when they announced Jamie Foxx. I mean, not that I have a sort of background of, I used to watch the animated show. I'd seen the Raimi trilogy and I read comics, but when someone would get cast for a comic film, I'm never one to be like, wow, like this is incredible or this is awful. It's just like they've been cast, because who's not been cast in a Marvel film anymore? And Jamie Foxx had just come off the back of Django Unchained, which I think is incredible. And I really like Jamie Foxx. I've not seen many films of his, but I thought Jamie Foxx is a Spider-Man villain. Cool, I'm in. I've just seen him in Django Unchained, and I remember loads of set photos leaking, because obviously a Spider-Man film shoots in New York, you're going to get set leaks.
Yeah.
New films shoot in green screen rooms, and for some reason there's still set leaks. I don't understand why or how. That's a conversation for Sony. But Jamie Foxx is Electro. I love Batman Forever. I love Jim Carrey. And the one thing I've took from day one of this is that he just reminds me so much of Edward Nygma from Batman Forever. And some people are going to hate that, and that's fine. But I don't know why I really enjoy it. I don't know if you're kind of similar at all with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen Batman Forever in a long time, so I can't make that comparison without watching it again. But I mean, I can totally understand, a villain who's maybe very undecided. Like very people either love or hate him, and I think Electro's kind of that. I think most of the villains in this, at least in these two films, are like that. Very polarizing. With Electro, I mean, I'd only seen Jamie Foxx. I mean, I knew him more as a musician. I'd only really seen him in Dreamgirls, which I don't think you can really compare. But he was quite good in that, so I was excited for what he could do. Surprised that he was so geeky. I didn't expect that character to be who he was, and I really did feel for him. And it was, it was cartoony, and I think in a superhero film that's fine as long as it's not so overboard and doesn't blend with the rest of the film. I think it was just enough where he's being. I can feel sorry for this guy. I can feel like, okay, you need maybe some help or something. Something needs to go on. But clearly, he was intelligent and had a lot to offer. He helped build the grid that New York City is now powered on. He'd obviously done something, and he wasn't being recognized for it. So I can understand his motivation 100% about eventually, he's still got Max in there when he becomes Electro, and you see that in the Times Square scene. He's confused. He doesn't know what's happening. Then everyone notices him, and he kind of like feel his elation about it. You're like, oh my god, I'm finally being seen. And then Spider-Man's face shows up everywhere. The person who he's idolized, who suddenly, everyone's looking at him, and he's being chanted as someone who's awful that needs to be destroyed. So I understand that outburst and where that then takes him. Really, he ends up being a pawn in the whole thing, and I would kind of, I can't say he's like the most tragic character, but he definitely leans more that way because he just doesn't have the information, and the information that he does find out is all mostly lies, and he's just fed them by someone else for their own gain. So I do feel sad for him, and I kind of wish there would have been a bit more towards the end where they either got through to him as something rather than just destroy him. I don't think that's going to happen in No Way Home. I don't think he's going to have this big thing, but I mean that's probably like my biggest disappointment with him is the character with layers, and I think as they build it up to that, and I don't think his climax fits with what's been built up.
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of with it because the Times Square stuff I really enjoyed. I love the concept that he hasn't really seen what's happened to him. Like he's sort of discovering his issues, and I think with Spider-Man, so many origins of like Spider-Man villains, film, TV, comics, they've always had tragic backstories or different types of backstories, and I loved the concept that this is someone that had his sort of life's work stolen, mocked. He's the electrician, and he's obviously got issues beyond belief with the whole addicted to Spider-Man, massive fan, and very smart way to introduce him, I always say, with him getting saved by Spider-Man because it sets that up quite naturally. And the Times Square stuff I thought was a really good set piece, in absolute truth. I remember at the time it was all over the trailers. It was, as I said, it was online because you don't just film in Times Square and no one gets videos of it. But the actual set pieces you kind of put really well as well. His sort of turn, he's afraid, he doesn't understand what's happening to him, and I really enjoyed that. And there are some things like the voice is awful. I have to just say that I've really, and I think it's because without getting into the Raimi films too much and maybe what came after, I think these films are so widely accepted now, comic book films, that you can have bizarre villains, different villains, and you can put human elements in them, but the electric tin voice I think does detract from it because it reaches a point where it goes from here's Jamie Foxx to here's the CGI thing, and I think the voice, you just lose a bit of humanity with him, which is maybe also kind of intentional. But the Times Square stuff I really enjoyed, just that premise that they were watching him, and it's quite tragic as well that Peter Parker, Spider-Man's trying to help him. He wants to help him too. He's telling him, there's electricity, we're going to help you get out of here. And obviously it's the police that shoot him, and chaos ensues. And I think it was a really great way to set him up. And then I think you are right, he becomes this pawn, and he spends the next third of the film locked up in a cage with enter German science. Quick question: I know you're a massive Bond fan. I'm convinced the Doctor calls himself Dr. Kaufman. And I
Oh
have
well, I
these
mean,
sort
I wrote it down. I did write it down because I was like, okay. I was like, firstly, cue stereotypical German evil character, which
yeah.
I don't know whether that's really vital anymore to have, or whether it ever was. But I did write it. I think it's like Doctor Kafka. So it's Kafka. But yeah, it's very very Dr. Kaufman vibes there. I mean, he definitely a personality, which is good. But I mean, I was like, okay, you need to go like now because I want him to kill you. Like you are done. Um, so yeah, very weird. I did want before I forget, I did want to add what I really like about the Times Square scene is just that the music, the voices under that, where
Yeah.
it feels like you're getting his inner monologue of they lied to me, they're dead to me, like all that stuff, and it's building, it's ramping up, and you really get inside his head, and that's what I love. And I think I don't mind the voice because of that a little bit more. I think, but I definitely understand, and I think it can be a little bit distracting. Yeah.
The music. I'm going to we'll speak about this on the soundtrack later, but the Electro theme. Hans Zimmer has always been my favorite composer, so I'll give him his speech at the end. But the very first time I saw him live with my mom, obviously she prefers the music more so than the films. It was like he did 2 gigs in London. This is 2015. Oh God, no! This is 2014. But yeah, was that long ago? Okay, the film had just come out, which makes sense.
Yeah.
He did this set from. I was like, wait, why is he doing the Amazing Spider-Man? That wouldn't be on my Hans Zimmer listen to live set. And then Pharrell Williams came out, who obviously did.
Oh wow.
The magnificent. He did. I think Happy had just come out because he sung that with them all and a laughing. And then I was like, why are they singing Happy? Why is Pharrell? I was like, oh no. I was like, Pharrell did the Spider-Man soundtrack with him, and then it was Pharrell on the mic doing the whole whispering. They blacked out the stage. They had like blue orbs, and it was really cool. I'm glad you brought
sounds amazing though, because I think the whole soundtrack, that element, I think just you want a soundtrack to kind of like bring certain, whether it's a storyline, a character, anything to life and make it resonate a bit more. And I think that is like a real perfect blend of everything is complementing each other.
Yeah, and I think as well with that specifically for Electro, he has like a really happy go beat. I'm not good with instruments and stuff, but he's got like a really happy upbeat song, and obviously then it sort of descends into the into the voices and dubstep. Whether it's a thing of the past, I don't. I'm probably not. Probably is a thing of the past now. Sorry, but when your villain is literally electric, there is absolutely no issue in the world for me for the theme to be an electric type song. It makes more sense than most. And I think it's done really well to go in with the scenes, going what we've just seen. And I think again, this is the Zimmer stuff that you've got a character that can get defined by his theme, and not many people get themes. I mean, certainly off the first Spider-Man film, we'll go into some of the other characters as they pop up. But the Electro stuff, I'm glad you brought that because not that I'm biased to listen to it live, and we've seen him a few times since, and every time he does the Electro suite, not with Pharrell Williams every time we've seen him, but it's one of them where that's clearly a song that means a lot to him that he's really enjoyed to score over the years. And another mini Easter egg, I think there's a Ramones poster in his bedroom, and Johnny Marr from the Ramones is the guitarist for the film. So I don't know if that's I don't know if that's an intentional Easter egg or if it is just a really mini sort of thing. That's something I noticed.
I feel like it has to be because I mean, there's quite a few Easter eggs I think in the film. I feel like it has to be, especially like musical ones. I mean, you get the Spider-Man theme song on the mobile, which I then got myself because I was like, this is just so funny, it's so cool. You get, is it Incy Wincy Spider or something? Is like on the grid at the end, which when I watched it the first few times, I didn't know what it was. I knew it was something, but I couldn't tell. And then I was like, I need to find out what it is. And as soon as I found out, I was like, oh, of course, it's makes so much sense. But that's what I mean when it's you can have it so in your face like the mobile phone, and have it so you may not even notice it with the power grid at the end. But I just think it's all like really just fun things to include. Like they didn't need to do either of those things, but I like that they use music in different ways like that.
No, exactly. And I think me, even a week ago, I'd say would like mock that sort of stuff. But now I sat there saying it does quite work, and I know we'll sort of reflect on the film at the end. But the whole color palette, everything switching. This is the most comic booky of certainly of I'd say since the Raimi films. You've got Raimi's feels like comics, and this one does not. personally, I don't think the Holland ones have. Maybe I'll get proven wrong next week,
Mhm.
but those little things, it's the kind of things you'd read, right? It'd say like ping into Spider. Green Goblin did it in the first one. It's not,
Yeah.
and you get a great line from Garfield, and I hate that song as well, which quite make me laugh actually. But
Yeah.
yeah, Electro is a fascinating one, and I really want to talk about Rhino because going back to the marketing, he was everywhere. It was there are 3 villains for this film. It is Electro, Rhino, and the Goblin. And the Goblin was the quiet one, but Rhino was everywhere with Electro. And listen, Paul Giamatti, absolutely love him. I don't know if you've seen Jungle Cruise this year. He had like 2 scenes and he stole
Oh,
the
really?
entire film. He had a pet parrot on his shoulder. But you know when there's an actor that's sort of in on the joke, he's not signing
They
up
know
for
they
some...
know what film they're in.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly that. And he's not signing up for some method acting Russian gangster. Paul Giamatti in this film, okay, you can talk comics stuff. Is he the Rhino? Is he not? But the opening scene where it's just like Paul Giamatti in a Russian accent talking to Spider-Man, shouting at him, I absolutely loved it. And again, it's something I hated the first time I saw it, but I just sat there saying, actually, it quite well fits the tone again, like some of the Electro stuff. And I just think Paul Giamatti is probably having the time of his life in the film as well.
Yeah. I think the beginning and end is pretty much good bookends. I mean, obviously you've kind of got like what you would, I mean, I would call it a pre-title in terms of like the flashback stuff, but I think the chase scene at the beginning and the fight at the end, they're both, I would call the Spider-Man triumphs. It's him, at the top of his game essentially. He's out there saving the day. I think having someone like Paul Giamatti just kind of be a bit camp about it, just kind of going a bit over the top, just selling it to the back of the theater, really going off. I think that's great, and I think that's what you need. And I think you need to have someone who feels like they are a character. They are they are so unique in what they're doing. And I think it was probably not great of the marketing to lean on that character so much because of how little it's in. Although at the same time, I kind of get a bit I question people who are like, oh, there's so much stuff with villains like Spider-Man 3. I'm like, well, if you really watch this film, Rhino's only in it for not very long at all. Same with Goblin is not in it for very long. It really is Electro is the main villain of the film, and even then he's not really super villainous about things. So I do question that, but I think the inclusion is fun, and I think it's good to kind of have like a villain who is probably known but isn't the main focus. But it's just nice to have, and it's a nice reference. It's a nice thing for the fans, I would hope, unless it was very unjust. But I did enjoy him in it anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you're right as well. You mentioned the marketing. Spider-Man 3. You've got what? Venom, final act, Sandman, beginning, middle, Harry, beginning.
Dotted about.
Yeah, and you can tell that's like student differential of this one. It is, I think you're right, it is just marketing that, Rhino's opening scene, closing scene. The final shot, the one thing that does annoy me, this isn't just this film. The awful trend of the final shot of a film being one of the main trailer shots.
Yeah.
I think this is the film where it just broke me, where I'm just sick of seeing it. Was him swinging with the fight with the rhino, and I was like, I get why you're not showing it, but just don't put that in the trailers. And they had to, and because there's some all right moments. You've got the whole little kid thing, and I just love the fact that Paul Giamatti doesn't care that there's a child he wants to kill. It's that kind of ridiculous over
it's like,
the
oh,
top.
he's dressed as Spider-Man, so I have to destroy him now. It's it's absurd. It's so weird, but it makes for a good moment for when Spider-Man does appear, and that's the purpose of it.
And he's not,
the kid was in it
taking,
earlier.
He's not taking himself seriously doing it, and I think what you lose with, I don't know if this is just comic films, but you'll get an actor. I'm just trying to scan in my head. There's been so many where like they have completely gone into a role. Jared Leto, absolutely cannot stand him now. But any film you see with Jared, I think Joker's maybe the best example. That he sent someone a used condom. He sent someone dead rats. He sent all this stuff on set for 3 minutes of screen time. But the problem is that he'd been hyped because of his actions as an actor.
Yeah.
Whereas Paul Giamatti's just come on. Okay, this is, as you said, this is the film. He's done it his way. Does he have a tattoo? I can't remember, a tattoo on his
I
neck
think
or his
so. Yeah,
forehead?
I think he has it on his face. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's just I absolutely love Paul. I think the more I've seen him, and the more I've loved him, and this is no different. I maybe he'll pop up in No Way Home. He hasn't been confirmed. If he
Yeah,
did,
they are like, oh, all the villains that you've seen so far are back, and it's like, well, maybe,
yeah,
maybe not.
if he did, it would be incredible. And you know what? Paul Giamatti is the kind of guy that would just pop up for a joke and just get in on it.
Imagine it's just a 5-second cutaway. Oh yeah, he's down there. He's some police officers are fighting him off or something.
It'd be so funny. It's what. I mean, we'll talk more about No Way Home later, but it is just one of the everyone's coming back, and obviously, I think with Electro being a big one. And speaking of another villain, I don't think we'll be seeing this one coming back anytime soon.
Which is a
Dan
shame.
DeHaan. I can never pronounce it. Is it DeHaan or DeHaan? I should do my research.
I think it's DeHaan. Like I've always heard it as Dane DeHaan.
When he was cast as Harry Osborn, I think did it start as them saying, "Oh no, he won't be the Green Goblin in this film," and then they're like, "Oh no, he is the Green Goblin after all." In marketing, they switched over, but I remember seeing him in what is the name? Chronicle, where he was the main character, and he was very good in that film. I think it was Josh Trank, and when he was cast as Harry Osborn, I said, "Okay, we've had James Franco for X amount of years. They've not cast a carbon copy, which is great. It says it's one of Peter's childhood friends, great, and he'll be in it." And this character, I'm very torn on because I think the writing is at its weakest with him, but I don't think the actor. I think he's doing a very good job with his source material. I'm a bit sort of torn on him still because I sort of joke to my friends and call him the crack addict goblin. I know that he is like the not against comments of like the ultimate Green Goblin, where it's kind of he physically becomes the Goblin more so than putting on armor or putting on the sort of spandex and stuff. But the way I've kind of always seen this, they needed to kill Gwen. There's only one villain that kills Gwen, and you can't use Willem Dafoe because Willem Dafoe is such an iconic image / character. So they had to put it on Harry and change the Goblin origin, kind of. That's how I've always seen it. So I've never really had a problem with this. I actually don't mind him. It's just the writing around him I've always struggled with.
I'm kind of the same. I think what Dane DeHaan does is great. I don't have a problem with him as Harry or as Goblin. I mean, I think the design of Goblin, I can understand people not liking it. I don't really mind it. Based on what they're doing, it's not like he's putting on a mask or anything. He's literally given that. What I do have a problem, and I think in general, is just the use of the Osborns in these two films. I think if you're going to do this, you really should have done something in the first film with him. You should have had more, like there's very, very little of Norman in the first, where he's referenced, he's in shadow in one shot on the screen and then that's it. And then you get him in this film, and obviously again for people who don't maybe know much about it, they may just assume, oh, Norman Osborn. Oh well, I mean he was the Green Goblin in that trilogy, in that film, so he's got to be there. So maybe the fact that he dies in the film so early on, that could have been something maybe to confuse fans and whatnot. But I think because you don't have Harry in the first film, it really affects how his story progresses in this film. And I think it needs more time, and I think you need to see kind of like him slowly become mentally more like fixated on, I need to survive, I need to become, I need help, and I'm just going to take it however I can. Whereas I think you kind of like look at him again in a sympathetic way, especially at the beginning, and you can understand again with this, like Electro, you can understand why he's made certain decisions. But again, I think the execution was not fully realized. I think him as Goblin and throughout that whole thing, I think that's really great. I actually love his acting where he sees Gwen and he looks at them both a couple of times and he puts everything together and he realizes that Spider-Man is Peter and he feels another betrayal, and that's the point where he thinks, okay, I'm going to take Gwen. And I think the way that's done is great, but it kind of makes me feel like that whole scene was written first and that everything else was written around it. And that's all well and good if you've got stuff to back it up. But when, Harry is essentially a new character in this film, you really need to put time in there. And if that's going to be done, then he kind of maybe has to take precedence over Electro, and he's not. And they try and do it simultaneously. And I don't think it's the worst thing. I actually think it's quite good, but I don't think it could have been as good as it really should have been.
No, that's a really good point, because they bring in a lot, and I mean, without going back to the Raimi films, I think you'll get more of the Goblin comparisons. Franco got, first film, fractured relationship with his father, ending with the father dying when he said he's gonna, repair their relationship. Second film, as you said as well, the betrayal of Peter Parker, finding out at the end it was him all along. And then the third film is your Goblin thing, and that's a 3-arc structure that backfired in the third film without a shadow of a doubt. Probably a victim of Sony, I think so. And whereas in this one, it's like, okay, we're bringing Harry in, cool. And by the end of the film, it's like he's already been the Goblin, and now he's in prison planning his Sinister Six. And it's really tough, because I think you kind of nailed it. Is that you want him more time, that you've got to build up a friendship, build up a relationship with the leads. Then you can have the stuff with the father. Then you can have the, I call it, I know there's a formal name, but it's like Goblin a virus, basically. It's like the version of Corona for the Osborns, an ultra rare genetic.
I wrote it down because there's certain things that I wrote, and I was like, is it called that? Is it called?
I've written on the spot, but I'm convinced they try and put the word Goblin in there at some point, or something sounding similar.
I've written Norman warns Harry about retroviral hyperplasia, and that it's genetic. And so I was like, oh wow, okay. I think it's interesting that they went down that, but then it's like, I want to know more about that. Has Norman always had that, or has he done something to himself? But he says it's genetic. I think there's a lot of untapped potential, and I would have liked to have seen a bit more of Norman potentially in the spotlight, maybe in the first, working with Dr. Connors in the first film potentially, and then just seeing him, weaken and succumb to this, genetic virus or whatever it is, this disease, to then, which makes sense for them to have Harry come in maybe there. I just think there's a lot of stuff that they could have done with the Osborns in general. Norman's such an important character anyway. Harry's such an important character to Peter. We should have seen that relationship, and it's a lot of tell, not show, and it should be show, don't tell. It's like, oh, this person, oh, you helped with my parents. They could have had flashback of younger Harry with younger Peter. There's things that they could have done that would have been very simple. Wouldn't have taken very long.
Yeah, and it was so quick and getting to it. And you sort of mentioned again stuff they missed out in the first film. I know this one obviously spoke about the whole here's Peter's dad's subplot, which I'm not fully against something like that. But when the film's missing so many core plot things, it's so diluted to get back to. I always got, it's like an Oscorp conspiracy. Like both of these films, that the Oscorp have mapped out their vision. They've created the Sin Six. We'll get into all that stuff as well. But everything is Oz. Like, talking about things from the time. The big thing obviously is the Avengers came out in 2012, and then Sony think universe time, let's go. And it's almost like their Shield / Hydra needed to be Oscorp, because that's the only big company in the rights they own of Sony, and it's really odd. And I think even going back to the first, like bringing in Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the leaked Head in Box story, which came out to be true. So the original ending, the original credit scene before they gave it to X-Men, which still bonkers today, was the room of the guy in. I don't know if he has a name. The guy with the hat that walks in the shadows.
Yeah.
He was going to go into a room, and Norman Osborn's head would be in a frozen box, like visible. There's a photo of it online, and their whole plan was that Norman Osborn was alive, and they'd frozen him, and he would come back and turn to the Goblin, which makes no sense because his son is now the Goblin, and it enters this Sony sort of web of nonsense without sort of making a weapon. But it's it's really tricky because they're trying to develop these characters. And even the first one, like, Norman Osborn's dying. It's a really bad thing. It's like, okay, I get you're scared of casting him, but as you said, you need to show, not tell. And someone like Chris Cooper, I don't mean to sort of diss his career. He's been very success factor. He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that would be like, hey, can you do 2 films? You're going to be in one for 30 seconds and the second, like, 5 minutes. I doubt he'd say no to that. I don't think many actors would say no to something like that. A 10-picture deal, absolutely they'll say no. But it's one of those really odd things that, again, I think is maybe Sony's fault more than anyone in direction, that they wanted this insane plan. And it just backfires. And going back to Harry, it's like, okay, this virus is new genetics. Okay, cool. Develop that for a film. And then we're like, we're 30 more minutes in. It's like, I've got a green rash now and I'm going to die tomorrow. And you're just there.
And what,
like,
Norman's in his 60s or something at this point or something? Or he's aged, or he's suddenly aged. Well, I mean, obviously he worked with Richard Parker, and so he would be at that age. It's a bit
quick.
Yeah, you can't really, you can. It just doesn't seem very plausible.
No, exactly. And as you kind of said earlier, I think you've hit the nail on the head as well, that they got Gwen's death and they just worked backwards from that point. They decided, okay, we're going to kill Gwen. Now, what do we need to kill Gwen? Do we need to cast Norman? Do we need to cast Harry? How do we do the Goblin stuff? And when you think of the gap between films, 2012 to 2014, 2 years. I know the modern day superhero films are planned out over 10 years and whatnot, but Sony's never really done that. But 12 to 14 is even smaller a gap. You'd think, they'd maybe have a bigger gap between 1 and 2, and then rapid fire the other ones out because they'd have a plan. And I think this is where they struggled. They never put the brakes on, had the pause, had the discussion, and without getting into Bond, which everyone can argue has definitely gone the other way of, we slam the brakes on, we make a film, and then we start when the film's out, which you need the blend of both, I think, to work. You
need to have momentum, but at the same time, you need to kind of take each step as it comes, and really get everything sorted. You need to get a good outline, at least in what you're trying to achieve anyway, where you want the story to go, where these characters are going to be, what's going to change them in this film. That's when you go into how do we make that happen, and what can we weave together, what is going to work and is going to seem like it could happen. And I just don't think that's achieved with the Osborns and the Goblin, and the Goblin is an effect of that. That's what it does. I mean, despite me really loving his scene, it kind of puts everything into the air, especially at the end at the the Ravencroft Institute. What's going to happen? You get Harry's in there. That Kurt Connors is in there in the last film. There's all these like puzzle pieces that are kind of being put into existence, and it's like you can kind of see what they're trying to do, but it's just not there. And maybe with more time, they could have, done an ending for the second film, which really would have been, earned, and it would have felt correct, and it would have made you want to get to that next film. I know there's the other alternate ending with, Richard Parker as well coming back, which is another thing where it's like, okay, because what I also really love about this film is again some of the themes. And I think, grief is, throughout, Spider-Man's life anyway, but he idolizes, his father a lot. And, I can understand, when you lose someone so young and you only have either good memories or whatever, and I think that's what really, I actually got quite, not emotional, but I really felt for May when she was like, I did everything. I could understand her frustration with Peter, but he doesn't know any better, because he can still in his mindset think like a child from just remembering good stuff with his dad, and then him going, but May's done everything since then. And I really felt for her. And I just love that kind of, that conversation of, yes, he was your father, they were your parents, but I'm your mother. I have been there, and I like what they're trying to do with those things. And I like that Peter is in that position of, I don't really know. I don't want to hear a bad thing about my father. I don't want to know that he was not who I believe he is. but May's right in that you don't know who your family is, and I think that's really great when Peter realizes when he gets on the subway train at the Roosevelt that he was right to feel like he was right because his father did what he needed to do, what was best for everyone, including him. So I think that sort of thing I've really enjoyed watching. And I appreciate even more now, having become more older and more mature. I can really appreciate that.
No, exactly, and that's really well said as well. And I think a lot of this comes down to Garfield. You mentioned the scene with I said name right, so Sally Fields, of course.
Yeah, Sally.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love with these films. That I don't think, not that Image Man struggled with it, because so many of the villains are sort of CGI creations. You've never had actors acting with one another in those situations. I think the first three, you've got great scenes with him and Doc Ock together acting, him and Willem Dafoe, and all these great character interactions. And in these ones, I've always feel like we've been restricted to Peter and Gwen, which isn't bad. Some of the best scenes in all these films, all the Spider-Man films, are these two together. But the Aunt May scenes in this is really powerful. I think that's when you've got two great actors acting with one another, and it's a really simple thing to say, but so many of these types of films, you don't get those moments for them to shine. And I think the scene you mentioned in particular is one of the strongest scenes of this entire film. And it's the whole, not to tamper on the scene, but then it's sort of, you have this wonderful moment, and then it's suddenly, oh, your dad was selling government secrets, and it's like, I was like, Sony, we don't need a conspiracy theory. We just had a really nice moment, and it's a very good scene that held up really well. And I'd completely forgotten about it until the rewatch in truth, and I think it's left that impact. And you mentioned as well him talking about his father, the Uncle Ben stuff. You get a few great moments of Sally Fields. You would have loved to have seen you today, be proud of you. And it's the core essence of that character, and without sort of getting into Tom Holland, I know you've not seen Tom Holland's films, but there's never been a mention of him, of Uncle Ben, and it's became a running joke online to a point where there's a wonderful scene in Far From Home where there's like a Mysterio vision, and it's about Iron Man. It's like, no, his uncle is it's Uncle Ben, that's Spider-Man's character, not Iron Man. And it's things like that you mentioned right at the start, actually, back in the day when things weren't planned out, where you had one film to discuss these characters. And that's what I've really missed with sort of, as these films have gone on more and more, these comic book films, I just miss the small scale world of, it is just one hero and his family and their plans. And without sorry.
No, so I was just going to say what I think is good about this this setup is that what I remember from the original trilogy is that Peter and May pretty much have a quite good relationship, and she doesn't, as much as she misses Ben, there's not a period of not, I don't want to watch intense grief, but it doesn't seem like much of like a they are going through something. Whereas here, Peter and May have a strange relationship throughout the entire first film. That what I really love is that they end that with he got the X, and it's like, oh, they're on their way to rebuilding a relationship that's become shattered because of this death, and that again is still growing in this film. And I think that's why again it makes the emotional scene between the two like hit for me, because I feel like that has again been earned. I think those character beats mean something, and Sally Field is a great actress, and I think because she has all of that behind her as well, that she can really go for it. And Garfield's a great actor, so when you get them both through that, they're able to do that, and they're both to channel that energy and make it so believable that they have, obviously been together for so long, that they have both lost, the most important person in their life, and they had to kind of figure out this new, status quo or something. They had to kind of figure themselves out and how they're supposed to live. She's saying that she wants to, get into, work in the medical field. She's trying to change her life to make her feel better, and he's doing the same with, his work. So yeah.
No, definitely. We were going to talk about the Sony plan, but I think we should save that nearer the end because it's quite insane when you really look into it. Let's talk music. We mentioned Hans Zimmer. I know we spoke before in live. There's a song I particularly really like as well. from the soundtrack. Do you want to talk about that? Because that is one of the best moments as well, I would also say.
Yeah, I think the whole. I think I said before this it's very weird to go to have these two films. You have James Horner do the first film, Hans Zimmer does the second. Two massive composers, two very different composers. And we've already spoke about Electro's theme, about how Zimmer really gets into it, and I think it's something I should be proud of because it's excellent. I came out of this film and was because I wanted to rewatch the goblin scene again. A large part of that was because of the music, the I'm Goblin piece in particular. It's very tense, it's very unnerving. It starts off so slow, it sounds creepy, and then when he says, I'm going to take away yours, and then he goes to get Gwen, and then it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and it's a roller coaster. It feels, that scene. You're so in it. You're worried about Gwen. You want Spider-Man to get her. You want to know what the Goblin's going to do. You get the smashing through into the clock tower. You get that whole fight. Gwen's falling. She's coming back up. This music is just in the background, like da 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 da, and it's just.
Yeah.
I really feel it, and I'm right there in it. And as much as I really appreciate the emotional beats in this film, I think that particular action bit alongside that music is probably like one of my favorite scenes, not just in this film, but I think it's one of probably my favorite film scenes ever, because I think everything works. The characters work, the music works, the setting works, and it just makes for something that I find really enjoyable, even though it does get incredibly sad. And once that music stops and she falls and then a different piece of music comes on, you feel that shift. And I think that's so intentional, isn't it? You've got to go from being in this fight to suddenly Gwen is falling, Peter needs to get her. So as much as I do love that whole scene and those two pieces of music, I think that whole Iron Goblin in particular is just excellent.
No, absolutely. I think this is where sort of the difference of the last one came in. I think Amazing Spider-Man, the score didn't work. And it's a shame because James Wan's a very talented composer. And then getting Zimmer in, who, 2014, he's just off the back of the Dark Knight trilogy. I don't know if he's done any other comic book films by that point in time. I know he's done loads since, but it's a big coup. And one of the biggest problems out of the first one was the theme, that they just didn't really feel like there was one. I know there was by association, but never by meaning. And just the opening set piece with the Rhino, the way that the spider transcends into his costume, and you've got a new theme, a new Spider-Man costume. It is a really great kickstart way to get the film going, to put things in motion. Here's Spider-Man. For a start, it's set in daytime, which we didn't get in the last film, which is really strange. When Dave pointed out, I'd never really clocked it, that bar the school scene, we never got Spider-Man in day, and we got loads of it again here. But the score, I think, works really well for the film. The scene you mentioned is probably, I would say, that and anything of Electro, the best music cues they do. And I think that's when you can tell that you've brought the right person to compose the score for the film. And another big question remains, if Garfield does come back, we know Electro is the only composer on the planet who I think likes to use older themes, who pays homage and respects them, is Michael Giacchino, who of course is composing the No Way Home score. So I would love if there is a triumphant return, that we get the correct sound for it. And also, that being said, of the villain as well, and it's Hans Zimmer's music, so I'm going to be really biased to say it's wonderful, because it always is. Let's talk. Okay, yeah, we won't do. We'll do Sony's after this one. Favorite scenes. I've spoke about Times Square quite a bit, so I'm not going to say that. It's really hard to pick favorite scenes because there's some really good ones. You've just done the best possible description, certainly for the music on the Gwen Stacy's death, but it's really morbid, but it's hard to look past that as one of the best scenes. And I do wonder, is it because that scene feels like that was the entire start point for the film? I think it's a very, very, very well done scene. The whole final act comic book battle, but getting to Gwen's death, I thought was handled really well.
Yeah, and I think also it's a legacy. It's a legacy character and a legacy, setup. This storyline has been around for so many decades. You don't want to do it directly the same, but you need to make it. You need to make fans really appreciate it and kind of be in the feels. And I think they accomplish it. I think you can't treat it with kid gloves. You've got to go all in if you're going to do a scene like that. And it's brutal. The death is brutal. I think obviously I think everyone saw as soon as that web came out and it was in the shape of a hand, everyone was like, oh my god, is she going to make it? Are they going to make it? And then I think what I love is, even though she's fault, even like the her expressions, it's like she's like goes from like, oh, I'm confident that he's going to save me, to oh no, and then like she finally closes her eyes, that last close up of her face before the web hits her, and it just seems like she's resigned to the fate. She knows. I get that vibe anyway. So then the brutality of showing that whichever way, whatever would have happened, she probably would have died. The web, if she was like 15 feet higher, she probably still would have died like in the comic, but she still pretty much hit her head on the bottom. Like it was out of control at that point, and that really, Peter and Gwen got into that, and there was really no way out for her. And Garfield's acting at the end, I mean, I think some would call it a bit over the top, but I mean, he literally had this guilt for Captain Stacey. He felt so much pressure. He didn't want to put her in danger, and the fact that he's now essentially, well, he thinks killed her. He's going to be a mess. You know, she was about to go. She was about to get out of there, and he's, you know, now got into a situation where he feels he's got into a situation. So it makes sense why he would be grieving for so many months and not doing it, because he thinks that when he gets involved, the people who are close to him die. So yeah, completely understandable, and that's why I think it is one of the best scenes because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way the scene's done, you know, you get the slow-mo, but I think what hits home is the shot of the neck hitting the ground. It's not like dramatic slow-mo. How many films would have the body hit the not to sort of dig on like Marvel, but whenever Marvel do it, it's like awkwardly lying there, leg bent backwards, like, oh, they're dead. And this one's kind of like, you know, you get the whiplash effect, and it shows how close he really was to saving her. And I think it's the bit where he dives down and the web's got her, but he's not connected to anything as well, which is makes sure it's like, oh no, like he's actually not even safe properly yet. And it's so well built up, and I think they don't make it too graphic, but they make it as graphic as it needs to be to do something like that. You've got to. I think I remember when I was younger, the comics, right? They never show her die as you wouldn't in a comic, but it was always in like a speech bubble. Like they never knew if the web broke her neck or if
it was all implied, wasn't it? Where it was like, was she killed before the fall? Did the fall? Was it the web? You know, I remember looking into that quite a lot, and I was like, how are they going to, if they're going to kill her, how is that going to happen? Especially if it's not off a bridge and they're going to do it in this clock tower. Is one of the gears, the cog's going to hit or something? What's going to happen? And I remember I watched the reaction the other day, and I was like, I think someone was like, oh my god, one of the gears is going to hit her, and that's how it's going to happen. I was like, well, that would have been a different way, wouldn't it? But
she sent in a complete another direction if that just sent her into a wall or something. But I think they had, for something that's ambiguous in the comics, you have to show that on screen, because if he'd have got down and cradled her, I think everyone, you know, I think a lot of people forget films how important the general audience are. They need to see it as graphic as it is, or at least, yeah, I always say that Nolan's the master of implied violence. You'd have had to have, you know, cut the camera away and had a thud or something. But the first time I saw that, I was like, that's a lot darker than I thought they would do, and I think that works in his favor. But I'm just trying to think of any other favorite scenes. It's not that I don't have any; it's that so much of this one blends into one. As I said, I love Times Square and the opening set piece.
Yeah, and I think again with both of those scenes, I don't think it really touched on it. Is Garfield himself in those scenes, and I think the humor. I think this time, like, I actually laughed out loud, and I didn't even like mean to, but you know when it's like the fire hose and with the hat on, I was like, it's so funny, like, and it feels like a Spider-Man thing. It feels like, oh, that's what Spider-Man does. He, you know, gets in on the joke. Him making all those jokes to Giamatti's character at the beginning. and he has those character beats throughout. I think the battery montage, I think is a cute scene. You know, him trying, he's like covering himself, he then sleeps on the ceiling. Like, what the hell? That's good. I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, I would say anything with Felicia in it, but she doesn't really have a lot. I would like to say that she's great. I wish she did more. I like that, you know, she is a bit sneaky. I do wish she was a bigger character. But again, probably not best for this film to be a bigger character. There's enough in there. I don't know what you think about her and about her.
I am. I mean, I love Rogue One, so I mean, not at the
Same.
time that we knew Rogue One was a thing, but
No.
Felicity Jones. I remember saying, "Oh, they're going to do a Black Cat film, and we're going to get to meet Black Cat," and I was like, "Oh, a Black Cat film? Okay, I don't know much about her, but okay." And I quite liked the whole. Oh, look, she's being sly. She's got a job on the board, and she's there. And I think the talk is now is that they reckon it will be a TV show when they do it, but I'm like, are they going to get Felicity Jones? I can't see it personally now.
At this point, probably
yeah,
not, which
too
is a
many years.
shame because I feel like she could have done it really well. And I think I'd probably prefer a film than a TV series. I think it'd be good to get like someone who's kind of not really had the spotlight and really, you know, not go all out, but kind of really
Bring them
give
into
the time.
themselves.
Yeah, give the time and effort to it. Yeah, absolutely.
And as well, you know, you've had Gwen Stacey. I know they shot scenes of MJ, but bring in another, you know, the perfect, I'm not saying next romantic interest, but how to deal with Gwen's death, bring in like a femme fatale hero. That's probably the easiest way to move into something new, which I may have been in their plan for Amazing Spider-Man 3. But yeah, there's so many things they said. Even, is it BJ Novak from The Office? He played a character completely, was like, why is BJ Novak playing this minor, you know, shirt and tie? And I was like, oh, he's called Smythe. I was like, that's the guy in the wheelchair that I used to think was Professor X on the animated show as a kid, and it all just clicked in my brain. I was like, Sony really were going for the long game on this one, weren't they? And I don't know if now's the moment to segue into the Sony plan.
I think it probably is. I mean,
yeah, I'm not going to go into everything film by film. I'm going to run out everything that I've been almost researching tonight. So obviously, as we kind of said earlier, you know, The Amazing Spider-Man was essentially Batman Begins as Spider-Man, and then the Avengers came out in 2012. Let's be honest, has reshaped cinema. It's 9 years. We're 9 years further away. We can say that now. And the goal was the cinematic universe. Ghostbusters tried it. Kong v Godzilla got there eventually. Obviously, this tried it, and by this trying it, it's now kind of come back with Venom and future things down the line. But I remember when this film came out, this was going to be the Avengers for Spider-Man, and the main answer to that is that Spider-Man is one character, not a universe. And so I'm just going to list them out. There was going to be a 2-part Sinister Six film before Spider-Man 3 and 4, which was going to be led by Dan DeHaan. So there's Catastrophic Failures number 1 and 2. An Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4, absolutely fair. The Sinister Six to be in Spider-Man 4. However, I don't know if you remember the Sony email leaks back in the day.
Yes,
I believe I could. I mean, not that I went digging for the email, but I believe they'd criticised Andrew Garfield in a lot of the leaked emails, which is very unfair. And part of it was that he'd signed a 3-picture contract as Spider-Man, so they were planning this 4th Spider-Man film, knowing that he hadn't been attached to it and he hadn't actually committed to doing it, which is incredible when you actually think that a company would proceed on such a big risk. This is my favorite one.
Weird. Yeah,
the Aunt May spin-off spy film. I don't know if you remember this. When this came out, I don't think anyone took it seriously until you found out it was real. It was going to be a period piece prequel set in sort of 50s, 60s with Aunt May as a spy. I think that became meme culture as the years went by. We spoke about the Black Cat film that eventually is now apparently going to be a TV series that's going to be Black Cat and Sable, which is basically just them nabbing the PS4 game DLC. And then my personal favorite, we knew we were going to get a Venom 1. Fine.
Yeah.
In Venom 2, Carnage was going to be Gwen Stacy reincarnated, played by Emma Stone.
So it's just a lot. It's a lot to take on board, really, isn't it?
It feels like a game of bingo or something. Like you took like random character names and things and just merged it together to make this new Sony Spider-Man film. But
yeah, I'm surprised they weren't vying for what's the face who played her in Spider-Man 3? Who played Gwen in Spider-Man 3? Who's in
Bryce
like
Dallas
Jurassic?
Howard.
Yeah, Bryce Dallas Howard. Yeah, I'm surprised they just didn't go. Oh, you know what? Let's just bring her back. Come on, let's just do that. It's crazy what. I mean, we say it's crazy. I mean their ideas that they had that they thought that they could do within the confines of what they had control of. I give them credit for trying. However, I think most of it is just not what I think it just wouldn't work. I think the Sinister Six stuff, obviously, yeah, I think you could probably do that, but I think we really need to set them up within Spider-Man first, and I don't think they'd achieve that with the two films that they had. Aunt May, I mean, I would love to know how she got from that to marrying Uncle Ben, who doesn't seem like the out there type, to that whole thing. Black Cat seems like the most plausible idea there, for sure. Venom is such a huge character that you kind of need to have that somewhere. Obviously, they've done that now. But yeah, and Gwen, that reincarnation. I just don't know.
I can't.
Yeah, and do you think Emma Stone would have been down for that?
That's literally my question. There's no way on earth I see Emma Stone, who when she won the Oscar 2015 or 16 as well, would come back to play a CGI monster that essentially eats and murders people. It's not an Emma Stone role, and it's amazing that this was ever on the drawing board in the first place. I think it's like a passing comic decades ago where it was just like, oh yeah, at some point Gwen was Venom, but at some point in every comic, someone's been someone.
Yeah,
and it's sort of like the bottom of the bone pile. Like maybe Emma Stone became an A-lister maybe across these two films. They thought, oh, we must get her back now. We've killed her. I was like, it's not really how it works. And I just think with Sony, I mean, looking at it now, there's this book that's come out. I really want to get it. It's about the making of the first 10 years of the MCU, the Infinity Saga, basically. And they've detailed the meeting in which Kevin Feige approached Sony to basically take back Spider-Man or make the deal they've obviously done. And apparently Amy Pascal, head of Sony, basically said she wanted to throw her lunch at Kevin Feige. Because obviously the deal they have, which probably the best get out of jail card in history, Sony fund the film, Marvel make it, Sony get all the profits. There is absolutely... That's the easiest sort of bet you can do in your life. Spend 300 mil to make a bill, and that's what's happening now. And you've got to think the way just listing some of those, what their plan was, is quite terrifying. And obviously, then what became, without getting too in depth on what's happening now, obviously, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name, but the Sony Universe. You obviously got the MCU. The first name was the Sony Picture Universe of Marvel characters, also called Spunk, which took them about 3-4 years to realize is a terrible name, and they've now renamed it.
I've never heard that. That's terrible.
It's so bad, and a real company let it happen.
And you feel like that is from like a TV show, like, oh, they know they're doing this. They're aware. They can spell.
It scares me. It scares me that they made it official, and only last year it's been renamed to Sony's Universe of Marvel characters. But what makes me laugh the most is they just have to put Sony at the forefront of everything. It can't be like the Spider-Man Cinematic Universe. It has to be Sony's Spider-Man. And I mean, looking at it now, they've got Venom 1, they've had Venom 2, they've got Morbius the Vampire coming out with Jared Leto, and they've got Kraven the Hunter getting his own film. And it's like they got lucky with the MCU, and now they've dug their heels in to restart their master plan. And I don't want to get into too much politics, but obviously with No Way Home, if the other Spider-Men come back, great. But we're going to get the Sinister Six, which was always their dream. I think Maguire Spider-Man was going to eventually lead there. This Spider-Man was going to lead there, to the point that, don't even notice in the credits, the animations were of the Sinister Six. And they're like, "Why are you showing me the
Oh.
Vulture's backpack when he's not in the film?"
Well,
Um,
yeah, because I mean, you see things in the film anyway, don't you?
yeah,
Like you get glimpses of that. You see like the Doc Ock arms, and it's like whoa, and see the Goblin, you see Vulture, you see Rhino, and I think those are the only four that you see. I think,
it's
but
so weird.
it's weird that they're so teasing about it, but they're not. That's not the story
Yeah,
they're telling, and it doesn't feel like a natural, story
reference as
progression
well.
for that. No, no.
And I wouldn't want Doc Ock to just be like a bloke that they just gave the arms to. It kind of cheapens all these other characters
And
that
that's
have
that,
been
and
out
that's
over
what's actually
time.
scary, isn't it? Because that's what they essentially did with Rhino. They
Yeah,
gave it to a criminal, this suit. Okay, here you go. Um, I just think we mentioned before. There's a lot of potential with what Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 did, and where that could have gone if they had brought Richard Parker back. How would that have affected everything? It would have definitely been a unique and interesting thing to do. I would like to know how he would have affected Peter and May's life and everything else around, with Oscorp, and what would Harry have done. Um, how would MJ have then been introduced if you've cut in all these scenes?
yeah.
Would you then have got the same actress back, or did they got someone new? Would they do a time jump potentially? What I haven't mentioned is what I love about these first two films is that they are still very much high school type, even though they graduate at the beginning of this film. They're still teenagers. They're 18, whereas I feel like the original trilogy they grow up a bit too fast for me. I don't think there's enough there.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's a shame, and I think it's a shame to say that Garfield didn't do it right, or didn't do it correctly. He got what he was given, and I think he did a really good job, not just as Peter, but as actually Spider-Man. He put a lot of effort into it. I don't think he deserves to get the blame at all. It should definitely
no,
be a Sony thing, for
and
sure.
that's where I stand. And I think with Garfield, I've not seen Tick Tick Boom, which I know he's very, very hot on the heels to get his Oscar nomination for, but he's a very talented actor that's done a lot of good films, especially since these films. I don't think these were ever. I don't want to get not Simon Farrow and Tom Holland, but Spider-Man's catapulted Tom Holland's career to the level he's at now, and no doubt
Mm.
is using it to get bigger films. Whereas I think Garfield's an actor that was heading towards these levels anyway, and if anything, getting rid of Spider-Man, not off his CV, but knowing he's not contractually going to be doing 10
He's
has
not going to
probably
be
made.
known as the last Spider-Man. He's not going to go,
Yeah,
oh well, yeah, you're Spider-Man. He's not going to walk into a room. I feel like
Craig.
Maguire has that. Yeah, yeah. I feel like Maguire could still get
Yeah,
that because of how big of an influence it was, like the superhero genre to have that trilogy. But now Holland, has got that. I feel like Garfield could say maybe he's dodged a bullet, maybe not. But I think
I
either
think so.
way, he's got the acting chops, and I think he, is quite particular about what he does.
Yeah,
This experience with these films has probably prepared him in a lot of different ways outside of just acting anyway, in terms of studio influence and everything else with that.
and I feel as well he's been asked about No Way Home every week for about a year, which is, it's both a blessing and curse, isn't it? That he's had probably the busiest acting year of his life in terms of releases, things postponed from last year to come out this year, Oscar pushes. He has to do press, and it's their job to ask him, "Are you in No Way Home?" And his deterioration of the press last year on a side point has been incredible, to the point where he just doesn't care anymore. And you know what? I've seen some really nice interviews with him. I know a relative passed away, and he spoke beautifully about his mother. I think on Stephen Colbert, who's one of the few great talk show hosts in America, and he's such an interesting actor and so dignified, so respectable, and a great actor. And I really not the fact I just want to see him come back as Spider-Man defeats the purpose of what I just said, but if he does come back this week, I think with Garfield we know it say this is me coming back as a one-off. I've got my
Yeah,
own career now, but I hope he gets Jamie Foxx also kind of. I hope Andrew Garfield gets the source material he deserved. I hope he gets his moment that he deserved, because I do think he's got fans. And sort of reflecting for me, giving my sort of final thoughts, maybe not just on this, but both of them. But I think that I'm not saying the world wasn't ready for his films, but I think that he got the raw end of a Sony deal. That the things that went wrong were not his fault, as you said as well. He is the best. Him and Emma Stone are the best two things in this, and there's no coincidence where their careers have been since these films. And
No.
not that it's a blip on the cards, but these were two films across 2 years. They got in and out. They didn't need to wait around. They didn't have X, Y, and Z be ready. And I know that Bond's probably the most famous thing for that, where when you sign on for Bond, you are essentially signing away 9 months at a time of a date you don't know yet. Whereas at least with modern Spider-Man or comic book films, it's these days it's now here's a 10 picture deal, and you'll make your film as and when you're not required to be in
Yeah.
hours. And
you may be in one for 2 minutes, another one for 40 minutes. Like, you don't like some, but it varies. I've not seen very many, but I know that in some cases, especially when it's such an ensemble, there are some characters that need to be on the wayside a little bit. What I would say about what you just said about these two particular films, I think, and like a lot of things, it's down to timing. These came out, you think back, not too long in the public mindset after that trilogy, which had been around for 6-7 years or however long, all there, and then less time between that and the first Amazing Spider-Man, and then even shorter between Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man's appearance in Civil War. Spider-Man has been at the forefront of superheroes, whether or not you didn't need to be in the Avengers. As soon as that Civil War trailer came out and Spider-Man appeared, everyone went berserk because people love this hero, people love this character. And I think regardless of what people think of these films, I still think they're they were necessary and they were iconic in a lot of ways. The second one more than the first, I think you'll agree. But I think it's just a shame that the timing just wasn't right for everything, really, and that Sony tried to take advantage of a situation which was so new at the time in terms of building a universe, and they just couldn't land it. And whether it was good or bad, it seems to be going very well for Spider-Man being actually part of the MCU. And we'll just see where this next film goes. I mean, I'm probably going to hear about it before I watch it, but I mean, I'm hopeful that if Garfield does appear, that he can, not redeem himself. I don't think he needs to redeem himself, but I just think redeem these films, which are unjustly, negatively critiqued. I know a lot of people have been saying about, will he be the one to rescue MJ or something, as as reference, to Gwen. And I would love that. I really would. I think it'd be great to just give him a moment to win, because even though he, obviously beats, the bad guys, he loses in these two films, and I would like to see him, come out on top.
No, absolutely, and I think it's what a lot of people would love to see as well. And I think it's not a redemption, but it's kind of just sort of that he gets, somebody else making the film on their behalf. And I know they said in an interview that Mark Webb has had input into Electro, saying this is what happened in their world, and it to me that reads a lot more of like we're certain of him popping up. You don't want to say it, but it's like I'm pretty sure Mark Webb's probably told them what Spider-Man was up to for a couple of years after, and it makes it very exciting. I know this is kind of the last review before we do get to No Way Home. Revisiting these films have been a lot of fun. I think certainly with the amazing. I mean, I love the Raimi trilogy anyway, and I've spoken about it so well for almost 2 decades now, which is actually quite scary. But these ones, getting the chance to go back to them, I really appreciate it. So getting you on board for this, I think, has been quite important, because this film is an easy target. I'm going to say that, there's no hiding that, and it has had that stuff online. But like what we spoke about before we hit live, there's a lot of films where people get older, they might have different opinions towards, or you do get certain fan bases where, I'm sure for a lot of kids this was their Spider-Man. Granted, he did a couple of films. This is still going to be somebody's Spider-Man in the same way that Maguire is, that Holland is, and Miles Morales certainly is starting to head into that way as well, with animated films and the games, and it does make it quite exciting for this week. So that being said, I think that wraps up everything we can say on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I didn't expect to be getting an hour and a half, I'm not going to lie. I'm actually really impressed with this, and I really appreciate you taking time out to come on for this today. So everybody at home, comment your thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Has this discussion maybe changed your mind? Things you enjoyed, things you didn't like? It's been a really nice discussion. Of course, if you do like Spider-Man, hit that subscribe button. Do like it. We're obviously growing, and as we approach the end of the year, we've got a couple of goals we're going to start to look into and set some targets for the next year. And as always, we're going to end these hype with the new Spider-Man. No Way Home is out in the UK this Wednesday, the 15th. So I'm going to say to hide off the internet if you can even try. I'm worried. I'm watching on opening night and I'm scared. I'm going to have to deactivate my phone on Tuesday, I think. But our review will be this Thursday, the 16th, live at 10 p.m. That will be a spoiler one. There will be no spoilers in any descriptions for anybody at home. It will be just titled spoiler, and then we'll just get into it when we do start the review. So anyone that would have seen it by then, do join us for this Thursday. That's going to be very exciting. We've got a lot of other things happening. Of course, it's Lord of the Rings, which Chris is covering. And we've also got, starting at the time this goes up 2 days from now, our first Matrix review, because there's another franchise coming back this year, which is The Matrix, of course. Our first review is coming this Tuesday, the 14th. And there's a lot more things, new reviews, discussions, all that kind of stuff. Hit us up on our social medias, Twitter, @cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. Hit the subscribe button, of course. And I'm going to bring up Sam's details. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure to get you on today. And I really want to see if we can get on for some more in the future, because for anyone that doesn't, we don't do behind the scenes, but we spent like a good hour before we even hit live tonight about so many different things.
It was pretty much like an hour and a half of talking about a lot of. I mean, me and George are the same age. We've grown up in pretty similar situations in terms of things that we like. There's a lot of stuff that I'm sure that we've got varying different opinions about. Potentially with similar backgrounds. So it's good to be firstly be invited. So thank you for inviting me on here, but to also just be able to talk so openly, so freely, be able to share opinions, whether they're good, bad. Just talk about film. We enjoy film. We love the art form and also what it means to us, and to be able to just be critical of things, but also just appreciate people have put work into this. People have put the time, effort, money, and to just be able to do so is great. So thank you for having me.
No, absolutely, it's a pleasure. And everybody, it said links in the description as well below. Follow him on Twitter. Look at the YouTube channel as well. As I say, we'll definitely get you on for some more stuff in the future. It's a really good discussion we had as well. And that wraps it up for our journey to No Way Home. As we said, we'll next be back on Thursday. Manic week, a lot of things happening. No unofficial Christmas parties at our end. Without getting to our current country's politics system, who knows what will have changed in the 2 days between recording and releasing this video. So,
have you got any wine and cheese? That's the only thing I want to
ask. One more so than the other, but
I think I know which one, and that's fine. That's fine.
That's good. I'll take it. But everybody at home, I want to thank you all for watching tonight, and be sure to join us on the next one. Take care.